Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a country, Lebanon, right? Once known for its incredible diversity. People even called it the Switzerland of the Middle East.
Yeah, that nickname really captured its unique blend of cultures, its vibrant economy.
Exactly. And then somehow it descends into 15 years of just brutal, relentless civil conflict.
How does that even happen? How does a nation seemingly full of life just fracture so completely from within and without?
That's the core question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's what we're really digging into today in this deep dive, the Lebanese Civil War.
Right. Our mission today is to peel back those layers. We're talking about a conflict from 1975 to 1990.
15 long years.
We want to trace its really intricate origins, look at all the different players, internal, external.
Many.
Oh, absolutely. And understand how it progressed, how brutal it became, and then crucially, what were the consequences? What resolutions came out of it?
Yeah.
How did it shape the Lebanon we see today?
Yeah, it raises that fundamental question, doesn't it? How does a state, maybe one that looks stable on the surface, just unravel to that extent?
Yeah, unravels so badly that its very fabric tears apart,
Yeah.
leading to just devastation.
Absolutely. And for you, our listener, this isn't just some dry history lesson. It's really a critical case study. It gives you these incredible insights into how really deep-rooted issues, political, social, economics, can just explode into violence.
And how local conflicts, ones that seem contained, can get so tangled up with regional powers, international forces.
It's this complex interplay, isn't it?
Yeah.
Power, identity, intervention, a pattern you see again and again,
No,
unfortunately.
it really is like laying the groundwork, the seeds of conflict, underlying historical factors and causes.
So to really get our heads around the Lebanese Civil War, we can't just start in 1975, can we? We need to go back further.
Way further. You have to look at the soil where those seeds of conflict were planted, the underlying historical factors that really set the stage.
And our sources, they really drill down on this. The heart of it all was this fundamental breakdown. The Lebanese state was losing its grip.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Losing its ability to do the most basic things a state is supposed to do.
Like what?
Like provide security for its people and, crucially, maintain its monopoly on the use of force. That sounds maybe a bit academic.
Monopoly of force, yeah.
But the practical reality is, well, it's everything. If the state can't control violence, who does?
And what's fascinating, as you mentioned, is how attempts to strengthen the state actually kind of backfired.
It's a real paradox. Look at President Fawad Chehab. He came in after that 1958 rebellion, and his goal was stabilization.
Okay.
He saw these huge disparities in development across the country. Some regions, often Maronite Christian areas, were doing really well, lots of investment, infrastructure,
Right.
while other areas, often Shia or Sunni Muslim areas, were just neglected. Poverty, lack of opportunity.
So he tried to fix that.
He did. He launched this ambitious development program to try and spread the wealth, make things more equitable. And at the same time, he tried to centralize the security forces, build a stronger national army, internal security, make it cohesive, uniform across the country.
Sounds like a good plan on paper.
Yeah.
Build a stronger, more unified, more secure Lebanon.
That was absolutely the aspiration. But the results?
Well, that's where it gets complicated.
What were those unforeseen consequences? Because like you said, it sounds like good governance.
It does, but the reality was messy. By the late 1960s, just a decade or so later, Chehab's development program, it just wasn't working politically for a lot of groups.
How so?
Well, when you try to rebalance resources, you create winners and losers, right?
Yeah.
Or perceived winners and losers. Established elites felt their power slipping. Others felt the reforms didn't go nearly far enough or weren't fair. So instead of unity, you got more dissatisfaction. And maybe even worse, that security apparatus he'd built up, the army, the intelligence services, they started getting this reputation.
Not for protection.
No, for suppressing dissent and for corruption. Hugely damaging.
So the very institutions meant to provide order were actually alienating people.
Precisely. The state tries to assert control, but its methods, the perceived unfairness, it pushes people away. And this created this deep crisis of insecurity. The state's authority just evaporated. And that vacuum.
Yeah.
It didn't stay empty, did it?
Not at all. Nature abhors a vacuum, especially a power vacuum.
And what rushed in was this. Well, this fragmentation of power. As the state weakened, these existing patronage networks and some new ones too, they didn't just watch.
No, they got active.
Yeah.
They stepped right into that void, started arming themselves, organizing their own security.
So it wasn't just a slow decay, it was almost a reorganization of power away from the state.
Absolutely. power shifted to these distinct groups, each with its own agenda, its own supporters, its own guns. And crucially, this happened along those pre-existing communal sectarian lines.
Which were already deeply embedded in Lebanese society.
Deeply. It just shows when the state loses that monopoly on force, other powers emerge, and they almost always follow those existing societal fault lines. It makes things much worse.
It really highlights how vital that monopoly is for stability once it's gone.
Chaos often follows, and our sources map out the main militias that really came to dominate this period. They weren't small gangs. These are significant forces.
Okay, who are the key players?
First, you had the Lebanese Front, often just called the LF. This was mainly Christian, right-wing, led mostly by the Phalangists, or the Phalange.
Rooted in the Maronite Christian clans, the traditional elite.
Exactly. They had held a lot of power historically in Lebanon's confessional system, and they wanted to keep it that way, preserve that order.
Okay, so that's one major pole. What was on the other side?
You had the Lebanese National Movement, or the LNM. This was fascinatingly diverse, a real coalition.
Wasn't it?
Secular leftists, various progressive groups, and a lot of Sunni Muslims who were drawn to that broader pan-Arab nationalist idea.
So a very different vision for Lebanon. More secular, more Arab-focused, challenging that Maronite dominance.
Absolutely. You can see right away these aren't minor factions. They represent big chunks of the population with very different ideas.
And there were others too.
Oh, yes. Then came the Amal movement. Its name means hope, and it's also an acronym.
Lebanese resistance detachments.
Right. These were Shia populists. They represented Lebanon's Shia community, which had grown significantly but often felt marginalized, left out of the power structure.
So they were demanding more representation, more power for their community.
Exactly. And then, of course, the actor that was both internal and external and incredibly volatile, the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO.
Representing that huge Palestinian refugee population in the camps.
A massive population by then, living in these sprawling camps which had become almost states within a state. And the PLO's armed presence, its operations from Lebanon, that became a huge flashpoint, a direct catalyst.
So these groups weren't just cracks in the system. They showed how deep the divisions were, how long they'd been simmering.
Absolutely. And they showed how much legitimacy the central state had lost. People weren't looking to the government for security or help anymore.
They were looking to the militias.
Increasingly, yes. For protection, representation, even basic needs. The government seemed weak, corrupt, biased. It's a critical lesson, isn't it? When trust in the state goes.
Communities turn inward, organize themselves.
And without a strong state to referee, that often means arming themselves. Militarization. And as if that internal decay wasn't enough, Lebanon was getting squeezed by these huge external pressures, especially around the Palestinian presence.
Right, the PLO operating from Lebanese soil.
The Lebanese government was walking this tightrope, trying to manage the PLO guerrillas operating out of the refugee camps, these camps. They weren't really under Lebanese control anymore.
Extraterritorial zones almost.
Pretty much. The PLO had a lot of autonomy, a state within a state, as you said.
And their actions, particularly those cross-border raids into Israel, provoked reactions, didn't they?
Swift and brutal reactions. That Israeli commando raid on Beirut's airport in December '68, that was a massive wake-up call.
Hitting the capital's civilian airport, not just a border post.
Exactly. It was retaliation for a PLO attack on an Israeli plane in Athens, but the strike was on Lebanese soil. It showed everyone just how vulnerable Lebanon was, how powerless the state was to control a PLO or protect itself from Israeli reprisals.
A huge shock to the system.
Absolutely. And this constant pressure, the cycle of PLO action and Israeli retaliation just kept destabilizing Lebanon. It cranked up the internal tensions like crazy.
Especially with the Phalangists.
Especially with them. They saw the PLO presence as a direct threat to Lebanese sovereignty, yes, but also to their own community's security, their economic interests, which depended on stability.
So it fed this dangerous cycle. PLO raid, Israeli strike, more tension inside Lebanon.
Which weakened the state further, making it even harder to control the PLO or stand up to Israel. It's a classic case of an external conflict ripping apart a fragile internal balance. Lebanon became the battlefield.
And right into this powder cake steps Suleiman Frangi. His election in 1970 seems like a real turning point towards war.
It really was. Frangi, a powerful Maronite leader from the north, won the presidency by a single vote.
Yeah.
Just one vote in parliament after multiple rounds.
Contentious from the start.
Very. And his agenda. Basically to undo Chehab's reforms. Dismantle that state centralization effort, push power back to the traditional, often sectarian leaders. Deeply divisive.
It raises that question again, doesn't it? What happens when the leader themselves becomes a source of division, weakens the very balance they're supposed to uphold?
Frangi's presidency really seemed to hit the accelerator on the unraveling. Sources describe his time as polarizing, corrupt.
Alienating Muslims and Christians.
Yes, many Christians felt the country was just spiraling downwards under him, and critically, maybe disastrously, his government was completely unable or maybe unwilling to control the PLO militias.
They just operated freely.
With impunity, that visible power vacuum, that failure of the state, sent a clear signal to everyone. The government is not in charge anymore.
And that failure had consequences. It led the other major Maronite group, the Jamail clan's Phalangist militia, to decide they couldn't rely on the state.
Exactly. They figured, if the state won't protect our interests or security, we'll do it ourselves.
So they stopped going through channels.
They started confronting the Palestinian militias directly. Not just small clashes, but deliberate, direct challenges. It escalated the violence massively.
A fundamental shift. The state was no longer the main player.
It confirmed it. The state wasn't the arbiter of power anymore. And that act, maybe more than any other single thing, set the stage for the war to officially begin. 2. The spark in the escalation. War's onset and early phases, progression, and internal-external actors. So you have this incredibly tense situation. The state is weak, militias are armed and ready, external pressures are mounting. The whole thing is just waiting for a spark.
And that spark came on April 13, 1975. That specific date marks the event widely seen as the start of the war.
It does. It wasn't random. It was the Phalangist attack on a bus carrying Palestinians to the Tel al-Zatar refugee camp just outside Beirut.
After lots of smaller incidents, this was the big one.
This was the one that lit the fuse. That single attack tipped it over the edge.
From those cycles of violence, skirmishes here and there,
into a general all-out battle, spreading across Beirut and beyond. And critically, it immediately pitted the Phalangists against the LNM, the Lebanese National Movement.
because the LNM, that coalition of leftists and Muslims, supported the PLO.
Strongly supported them by this point. So suddenly, it wasn't just a local feud. It was war between the major armed factions. The battle lines were drawn.
And the impact on Beirut itself was immediate and devastating.
Chillingly visible. In the months right after that bus attack, Beirut just suffered this general destruction. The central market area, Souk el Tawile, Souk el Shamil, the historic heart,
Hub of commerce, culture.
reduced to rubble. It wasn't just buildings, it was the symbolic heart of the nation being ripped apart.
And then came the most tragic symbol of the war, the Green Line.
Ah, the Green Line, not just a line on a map, a real, physical, dangerous dividing line, heavily militarized.
Splitting Muslim West Beirut from Christian East Beirut.
A no-man's land of snipers and debris, and it stayed there for the entire war right up until 1990.
With each side controlled by its militias. LNM and allies in the West, Lebanese Front in the East.
Solidifying their control, erasing any doubt about the state's irrelevance in those areas, the capital city itself became the bleeding edge of the division, a physical manifestation of those conflicts that had been brewing, now violently out in the open.
And as things fell apart internally, the regional powers started circling, didn't they? Lebanon became their playground.
A dangerous playground, a chessboard. They couldn't resist intervening, adding more fuel to the fire, more layers of complexity.
Like Syria.
Syria's intervention was pivotal. As President Frangi's term ended in '76, the Lebanese army was basically useless, split along sectarian lines.
So he asked Syria for help.
Made a formal request, desperate really, hoping Syria could stop the country from completely disintegrating, which would have been a disaster for regional stability too.
But Syria's motives weren't exactly pure, were they? They'd supported the PLO in the south before.
Right, seems contradictory. But in June '76, Syria launched a massive intervention. Their strategy was complex, opportunistic.
How so?
They saw the LNM-PLO alliance gaining too much ground in the north, potentially threatening Christian areas, but also Syrian interests. So they intervened, paradoxically, to help the Christians, to redress that balance of power.
So it wasn't about saving Lebanon as much as shaping his future to suit Syria, preventing a hostile state on their border.
Pretty much, it was about regional power politics. Maintaining influence, always is.
And Syria's move provoked Israel.
Predictably, if we look at this bigger picture, you see how one move triggers another. Israel saw Syria moving in, and they ramped up their own involvement.
Supporting the Christian militias in the south.
Yeah, viewing them as useful proxies against the PLO. Israel started seriously arming and funding them. It aligned with their strategic goal: keep the PLO away from their northern border.
And the PLO raids continued.
They did, which led to more Israeli retaliation. The big one was Operation Litani in March 1978. Israeli troops went deep into southern Lebanon, all the way to the Litani River.
A major operation to clear out PLO bases.
A sweeping military action. And all this foreign intervention, Syria and Israel getting directly involved, it forced the international community's hand.
That's when the UN force came in.
UNIFIL.
Exactly. The UN interim force in Lebanon, set up in March 78, supposedly to secure Israeli withdrawal, helped the Lebanese government regain control in the south.
But Israel had other plans, too. The proxy army.
Right alongside UNIFIL, Israel set up and backed the South Lebanese Army, the SLA, led first by Salah Haddad, then Antoine Lahad. Armed, funded, trained by Israel.
Their local buffer force, under Lebanese command, but doing Israel's bidding.
Essentially, yes. It just shows how external powers don't just intervene, they create facts on the ground. They empower local proxies, embedding themselves deeper into the conflict, making it harder and harder to untangle. 3. Deepening the quagmire. Major turning points, progression in internal-external actors.
So the war was already a horrific mess, and then came 1982, the Israeli invasion. That seems like it changed everything again. It was a massive turning point, probably the single most significant external intervention of the whole war. Started June 6, 1982. A huge Israeli military operation.
Okay, let's unpack this because it's crucial. Israel said the goal was border security, stopping PLO raids.
That was the stated objective, securing that northern border region.
But they didn't stop there, did they?
Not even close.
Yeah.
The Israeli forces pushed rapidly, way beyond that initial zone, all the way to Beirut's suburbs. And then they laid siege to the capital itself.
Besieging West Beirut for weeks.
For weeks. This wasn't just border control. It was a full-scale invasion aimed at crushing the PLO's entire military and political structure in Lebanon, root and branch. An incredibly ambitious campaign.
And the consequences were huge, reshaping the whole conflict.
Absolutely massive, and with ripple effects we still feel today. First, it did achieve a major Israeli objective, the removal of the PLO militia from Lebanon.
How did that happen?
It was negotiated. A multinational force, U.S., French, Italian troops came in to supervise the evacuation of PLO fighters. They left safely.
And the PLO leadership went where?
To Tunis, in Tunisia. That effectively ended their major armed presence inside Lebanon.
Okay, what else?
Syrian forces, facing that huge Israeli advance, pulled back their main units to the Bekaa Valley, a temporary setback for them.
But there was another, maybe unforeseen consequence. Something new emerged.
Yes, and this is critical for the long term. The 1982 invasion, while it got rid of the PLO problem for Israel, directly galvanized the emergence of new, powerful Shia groups. Most importantly, Hezbollah.
So Israel's actions inadvertently created a new, maybe even tougher adversary.
You could definitely argue that. Hezbollah emerged directly from the crucible of that invasion, fundamentally changing Lebanon's political and military landscape forever.
Wow. And while all this external drama was unfolding, the internal situation just kept getting worse. Assassinations, more fighting.
A horrific downward spiral. In August 82, Bashir Gemayel, the young, dynamic Phalangist leader who'd managed to unite the Maronite militias into the Lebanese forces, he got elected president.
Some people probably saw that as a chance for order. A strong Christian leader.
Maybe. There was a glimmer of hope for some, but it didn't last.
What's fascinating, or horrifying, is that cascading effect. Violence breeds violence.
Each act triggers another, often worse, often hitting civilians. Just 3 weeks after his election, mid-September 82, Bashir Gemayel was assassinated. A massive bomb at the Phalangist HQ.
And the retaliation was immediate and brutal.
Immediate, horrific, infamous. 2 days later, Christian militiamen under Eli Hobeika, a key LF commander at the time, and reportedly allowed into the area by Israeli troops encircling the camps, went into the Sabra and Shatila Palestinian refugee camps in Beirut.
And committed a massacre.
A systematic massacre. Hundreds killed, maybe thousands. The numbers are disputed, but the horror isn't. It became a symbol of the war's absolute brutality, the depths it had sunk to.
And electing Bashir's brother, Amin Gemayel, didn't stop the violence.
Not at all. If anything, new fronts opened up. Vicious fighting erupted between Christians and the Druze community in the Shif Mountains, southeast of Beirut. Old grievances, but also triggered by the Israeli withdrawal from that area, creating a power vacuum that both sides rushed to fill. It led to many Christian deaths, more displacement. It showed just how fragmented society was. Groups were fighting group against group, sometimes genocidally, while the state was just absent. The international community, the peacekeepers, they also paid a terrible price around this time. That multinational force, the MNF, American, French, Italian troops sent in '82.
Yeah, to oversee the PLO withdrawal, keep stability.
They suffered shocking casualties. Two events stand out, really hammering home the danger. April '83, the U.S. Embassy in Beirut was hit by a massive car bomb. 63 people killed, including 17 Americans.
Devastating.
And then October '83, the even more infamous suicide attacks. Coordinated bombings against the barracks of the U.S. Marines and the French paratroopers in Beirut.
Beirut barracks bombing.
Killed 241 American servicemen, 58 French paratroopers. Horrific. A total game changer for Western involvement.
And those attacks basically pushed them out.
Hastened their withdrawal. Absolutely. Happened early the next year, 1984. The message was clear. The mission was too dangerous, untenable.
And the Israelis also pulled back their main forces.
By mid-1985, most Israeli troops were out too, completing their main withdrawal. But they left their proxy, the SLA, in control of that buffer zone in the south.
So they still had a foothold and influence.
Definitely. Some powers pulled out troops, but left their proxies behind, ensuring the conflict simmered on. And that period, roughly 1985 to 1989, saw Lebanon really sink into what our sources call the militia economy.
What does that mean exactly, a militia economy?
It means the formal economy had collapsed and the militias basically took over, driven by foreign money flowing into them and the total absence of state control.
So what was life like? High unemployment?
Rampant unemployment, capital flight businesses and money leaving the country, skilled workers fleeing the chaos, scarcity of basic goods, just economic devastation for ordinary people.
But the militias thrived.
They stepped right into that void. They became the main employers, the main providers.
How?
They paid wages to their fighters, provided rationed goods, gave people a way to survive, even if it meant joining up. And they controlled access to everything else through illicit means.
Like smuggling, extortion.
Huge smuggling operations, widespread extortion, taxing businesses, individuals, and deep involvement in the arms trade, the drug trade, hugely profitable.
So they were like mini-states, running their own economies.
Heavily armed shadow states, exactly.
Okay.
Controlling territory, controlling the economy. It created this perverse incentive structure, didn't it? Why seek peace when war is profitable?
That's grim. It shows how conflict rewires everything, makes survival dependent on the violence itself.
It does. And during this time, whatever was left of the formal state institutions just disintegrated. Government ministries were hollow shells or controlled by factions.
And then the currency collapsed.
Yeah. The Lebanese pound, which had surprisingly held up for the first decade or so, finally collapsed in 1987. Hyperinflation wiped out savings. Daily life became incredibly hard. It just mirrored the state's total loss of control.
And politically, it was just as bad. A total impasse.
Complete paralysis. When President Amin Gemayel's term ended in September '88, Parliament couldn't agree on a successor. The power-sharing system was gridlocked.
So what happened? No president.
No president. And then Gemayel, literally moments before his term expired, did something really controversial. He appointed General Michel Aoun Maronite, head of the loyalist army remnants, as acting prime minister.
But there was already a prime minister. Salim al-Hass, a Sunni Muslim.
Exactly. So suddenly, Lebanon had no president, but two competing prime ministers, two rival governments, each claiming legitimacy. Utter chaos at the top.
A recipe for disaster.
Huh.
And Aoun, he didn't just accept being dismissed later.
Not at all. Even though the Haas government formally dismissed him as army commander, large parts of the military, especially Christian units, remained loyal to him. He held real power on the ground, a defiant figure.
And he wasn't passive. He went on the offensive.
He did. In February '89, he attacked the rival Lebanese Forces militia, led by Samir Giaja then, trying to consolidate Christian power under his command.
Yeah.
A bloody internal Christian fight.
And then he declared war on Syria.
March '89, he declared his war of liberation to kick the Syrians out of Lebanon. Hugely ambitious, incredibly risky. It led to massive Syrian retaliation, months of intense fighting, a siege.
Until a ceasefire was brokered.
Finally, yes. In September '89, brokered by Algeria, Morocco, and Saudi Arabia, even the regional players were getting tired of the endless fighting, pushing for a political track. 4, the road to resolution, negotiating an end resolution. So after all that, 15 years of pure hell, the path toward some kind of resolution finally opened up. The key was the Taif Accord.
Taif, Saudi Arabia, October 1989.
That's right. Most of the surviving members of the Lebanese parliament, the ones elected way back in 72, which tells you something about the political freeze.
Right, no elections for years.
They met in Taif, and after really intense negotiations, they agreed on this big constitutional reform package.
What was the goal?
To restore the government, but a modified version of that old power-sharing system, consociationalism. Basically, a system designed for deeply divided societies, ensuring different groups get representation, share power, stop one group dominating.
Which was Lebanon's system before, but it had clearly broken down.
Utterly broken down. So Taif tried to recalibrate it, fix it based on the bitter lessons of the war.
And how did it try to re-engineer that power sharing? What were the key changes?
The big one was reducing the power of the president, who by tradition was always a Maronite Christian.
Giving more power to
the prime minister, traditionally Sunni Muslim, and the speaker of parliament, traditionally Shia Muslim. A direct attempt to rebalance things, address the grievances about Maronite dominance that had fueled the war, reflect the demographic shifts.
a major shift in the balance of power at the top.
Huge. And it went deeper. Parliament seats, cabinet jobs, senior government posts, they were adjusted to be split equally, 50-50, between Christian and Muslim officials.
Moving away from that old Christian majority structure.
Exactly. More representative. And the accord even included this commitment, maybe aspirational, for the gradual elimination of confessionalism altogether.
Getting rid of the whole system of jobs based on religion, moving towards a secular state.
That was the long-term vision stated in the accord, affirming Lebanese independence, calling for an end to foreign occupation in the south.
But there was a catch regarding Syria, wasn't there? A very controversial part.
The elephant in the room. The Taif Accord said Syrian forces would remain in Lebanon for up to 2 years to help the new government establish security.
Which must have been unacceptable to someone like General Aoun.
Completely unacceptable. He fiercely opposed Taif precisely because he saw it as legitimizing the Syrian presence he'd just fought a war of liberation against. His opposition was a major hurdle.
Did the parliament went ahead anyway?
They did. Convened back in Lebanon November 5th, ratified Taif into law, a crucial step. Then they elected Renee Mowad as president, a consensus figure.
But his presidency was tragically short.
It's less than 3 weeks. Assassinated by a car bomb, November 22nd. Just shows how violent and unstable things still were, even as peace was being negotiated. Powerful spoilers were still active.
So they had to elect someone else quickly.
2 days later, Elias Rawi was elected president. But Aoun, defiant as ever, just denounced both elections as invalid, continued his rebellion.
And he was formally dismissed again.
Yes, announced again he was dismissed as army chief, with General Emil Lahoud appointed instead. But Aoun still controlled loyal troops. The standoff continued, even as the end game played out. The final moments of the war, they weren't peaceful. They came on October 13th, 1990.
But leading up to that, there was more internal fighting, even among the Christians.
Yeah, earlier in 1990, January onwards, brutal fighting broke out in East Beirut between Aoun's forces and Samiri Gage's Lebanese forces, Maronite against Maronite. Incredibly costly for their own community. Deaths, destruction. It was like the war consuming itself at the end.
A bitter internal conclusion.
Very bitter. And then came the decisive end.
Here's where it gets really interesting, as you said. Not a fade-out, but a final, decisive military action.
Exactly. October 13th, 1990. Syrian troops acting with what seemed like a green light from the international community, especially with the first Gulf War brewing against Iraq.
Right, shifting alliances.
They launched a massive ground and air assault directly on Aoun's forces in East Beirut. Overwhelming force.
Crushing that last pocket of resistance to Taif.
Crushing it completely. Aoun was forced into exile, hundreds of his loyalists too. And with his removal, the last major internal challenge to the Taif Accord and the new political order was gone.
So Syria, the force Aoun wanted out, was the one that ultimately enforced the peace deal.
The ultimate irony. But that action brought the 15-year civil war to a definitive, albeit externally imposed, end, and formally kicked off Lebanon's Second Republic, the aftermath and legacy, shaping post-conflict Lebanon, long-term consequences and resolutions.
So October 13, 1990, the war officially ends. But that didn't mean instant peace and sovereignty, did it? Foreign troops stuck around.
For a long time, that was a major consequence. The Syrian occupation, which started way back in 76 and got sort of legitimized by Taif, it lasted until 2005.
15 more years after the war ended.
15 years where Syria had a huge military and political footprint in Lebanon, influencing everything. Government decisions, security,
And Israel also stayed in the south.
Until 2000, maintaining that security zone policed by their proxy, the SLA. So for years after the war, Lebanon wasn't fully sovereign. These foreign presences were direct legacies, shaping the country, keeping that southern border tense.
And another huge legacy tied directly to that 82 invasion, Hezbollah.
Absolutely. As we touched on, Hezbollah formed in the early 80s specifically to fight the Israeli occupation in the south, galvanized by the invasion, backed by Iran and Syria.
But it didn't just stay a militia.
No, that's key. It evolved. It became a major political party, built this massive social welfare network, schools, hospital services the state often couldn't provide.
Making it incredibly powerful, deeply embedded.
Exactly. A formidable internal player, politically and militarily, right up to the present day. And another direct outcome. The PLO is gone. Their armed presence ended by the war and the Israeli invasion.
So, with the war over, Taif in place, the new government under President Rawi had this massive task. Put the country back together.
An incredibly delicate, dangerous process, reasserting state authority where it hadn't existed for years or where militias ruled.
And that meant bringing former enemies into the government.
That was a really complex step. The new cabinet included many former militia leaders, warlords, some would say.
A risky move, but maybe necessary.
Arguably necessary for integration. Give them a stake in the new system, try to prevent them going back to fighting. A fragile balancing act.
It really shows that transition from war to peace is never clean. Integrating former fighters, rebuilding trust.
It's a messy, fragile dance, and they had to try and demobilize those militias. Disarm groups that had run territories, collected taxes, had their own armies for years. A huge challenge.
And rebuild the actual Lebanese army.
Crucial. Under General Lahoud, try to create a unified national army again. Restored the state's monopoly on force after it had fragmented so badly.
And the economy needed rebuilding too. Everything was shattered.
Absolutely. Our sources point to the role of businessmen, often returning from exile with money and skills, like Rafik al-Hariri, who became prime minister multiple times.
The billionaire associated with Reconstruction.
He poured huge sums into rebuilding infrastructure, Beirut's central district, trying to revive the economy, bring back that image of Lebanon as a regional hub. Massive efforts. But even with all that rebuilding, the human cost of the war, it's just staggering.
More than 100,000 people killed.
Over 15 years, in a small country, devastating.
And nearly 1 million displaced.
Almost 1 million. Forced from their homes internally or becoming refugees abroad, uprooting a generation, scarring the social fabric permanently.
And the physical damage.
Billions of dollars.
Billions in damage to homes, businesses, infrastructure, cities ruined, the economy crippled for years. So beyond the politics, the interventions, the real cost is in those lives lost. Communities shattered, the trauma passed down.
That's the true legacy. But despite that almost unimaginable cost and all the challenges that remain, the Taif Accord did provide the framework. The foundation for Lebanon's Second Republic was laid, fragile as it was. A testament, maybe, to that enduring hope for some kind of stability.
This whole deep dive, it just hammers home how complex these conflicts are. No simple story is there.
Never. Layers upon layers, internal struggles, those deep communal divides tangled up with all the external meddling.
We saw how the state breaking down,
combined with those divisions and foreign interference,
created this perfect storm that lasted 15 years.
And Taif provided a fix, but a partial one. The foreign occupations continued for years. Hezbollah became this massive force, shaping Lebanon long after 1990, a new, uneasy balance.
So for you, our listener, maybe the final thought is this. What are those unseen echoes of a conflict like this? Not just the obvious political stuff.
Yeah, beyond the headlines, in the society itself.
In collective memory, in the trust or lack of trust between communities, the trauma that people carry maybe silently for generations. It really invites you to think deeper, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About the human story, the long, slow, difficult work of actually building lasting peace after so much division.
A challenge Lebanon still grapples with today.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.